Lawmakers would like to get rid of a program that allows voters to cast their ballots at any polling location in their county on Election Day. However, more than a dozen Texas counties are pushing back on this. They're arguing the option saves millions of taxpayer dollars and is more convenient for voters. VoteBeat is a nonprofit news outlet dedicated to local nonpartisan coverage of elections. VoteBeat reporter Natalia Contreras has been following this debate, and she's joining us now with more context from her recent reporting about this. Natalia, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Your report notes more than 80% of the state and voters in those areas have access to this countywide voting option right now. But you, in your report, zeroed in on two counties in particular that really illustrated how the program benefits these voters. That was Palmer County, which is on the New Mexico border, and Austin County, that's between here and Houston. So describe for people how the program really helps voters in those two counties.
Yeah, well, for example, in Austin County, it really helped with funding. I mean, some smaller counties just have not as much access to funding as larger counties do. And so this program allowed them to do a lot more with less. So even though more polling locations sound easy to do for smaller counties and rural areas, those buildings sometimes are not available or they just don't have the funds. In Palmer County, like you mentioned, I mean, someone who commutes several minutes outside of their town, and I think that people in viewers in your area can be familiar with this. Heading home, they could just, hit up any polling location on their way home as opposed to being limited to voting within their neighborhood, right? Like if somebody's not thinking about elections or election day and they just happen to remember on the last day, on election day, then they could just stop at any location. If there's a long line, they can move to the nearest location, the next nearest location that they can find. So it's not limited to where people can vote. And that's how it's helped these counties that we mentioned.
Yeah, we're very familiar with countywide voting here in Travis County, but let's take a look at the legislation that's on the table. Your report is detailing the efforts by Republican State Senator Bob Hall to eliminate countywide voting and take away the use of the electronic voting equipment that makes it possible. What is he saying is his reasoning behind putting this forward?
Yeah, Senator Hall has brought up this legislation in the past, and he has mentioned publicly and during Senate hearings that he doesn't think countywide voting and the results produced by countywide voting, election results that are produced using that program, can be audited. And he's also said that it's not a transparent system. It's unclear why he says that. He hasn't mentioned specific examples about this, and state and local officials have denied this. I mean, our laws are already pretty transparent when it comes to elections. Also, there's an audit that's done by the state. Every single election is audited. Election officials audit every single election, a school election, a local election, countywide election. There's an audit and a recount that happens after every election, and that's already required by law. So, like I said, some of these reasons behind it have already been disputed and denied. And so it'll be interesting to see when the legislation, and if the legislation goes up to a committee hearing, what Senator Hall will say about it this time.
A big piece of your reporting, and as you mentioned earlier in our interview, is the cost to counties. So talk about how this could affect them financially if this legislation passes.
Yeah, if the legislation passes, then that means for some counties that would mean maybe doubling or tripling the number of polling locations that they would have to staff, that they would have to acquire voting equipment for. If there's not enough public buildings that they can use or county buildings that they can use, then that means that they would have to acquire and rent or lease a location. One county even told me that, some of this can even require the county to build a public location because there just are not enough locations for the additional polling sites that would be required. Not just that, but also think about the workers that would be necessary to staff those additional locations, the hours that they would have to work. And those workers are not volunteers. They are paid minimum of $12 an hour. Some counties like Harris County, they pay a lot more for election workers. But not just that too. I mean, election workers are hard to come by in some areas. They've been harder and harder to find in recent years.
And before we let you go this morning, I want to point out there is already pushback happening to this proposal being out there. Commissioners in Kaufman County, which is in Senator Hall's district, recently passed a resolution opposing this effort, as well as Hayes County here in our area. What can these counties and these resolutions really do to influence our state lawmakers?
So what those resolutions are letting the legislature know right now is that they would like to keep this as an option. Even counties that don't have countywide voting right now have said, hey, we would like to keep the option. If our county keeps growing, if this is something that we need to do, we would like to have this as an option. They are sending a message saying, let us keep this decision local on whether to keep or eliminate countywide voting, because county officials are the ones that know their communities best. And so that's the message that they're trying to send to the legislature with those resolutions right now.
Interesting. We'll definitely be following it. And Natalia Contreras with VoteBeat, thank you so much for your reporting on this.
Thank you.